So thank you again to Interrail for putting this conference together. It's awesome to actually, be able to hang out and talk about EPM and see each other when we can't go anywhere or fly anywhere, or you know. Again, thanks to Interrail, and thank you, Edward, for these awesome T-shirts, which you can't see, but put mine on. So today we're going to talk to you about master data management in a hybrid environment. My name is Abhi Nerkar, one of the co-founders of EPMware, as is Tony Karatzis. And cool, the next slide. So we'll talk to you a little bit about what EPMware is. First of all, for some of you who may not know, a little bit of a company introduction, and we'll give you just a baseline on what EPMware does and how it works within the landscape of financial applications. So EPMware, first and foremost, is a metadata management and a data governance product. So it is designed for the business user to manage and control their metadata. So for those of you that are familiar with metadata management products, you've probably seen or used something like EPMA or DRM or maybe Informatica MDM or some other similar product. EPMware is kind of in the same ballpark, right? What we allow you to do is to, as a business user, visualize your hierarchies in its production state and to enact change in a web-based product. So as an end user, you log into EPMware, you're going to create a change, for example, to a cost center, and you're going to put that into a workflow process. Now, what EPMware does is that it ultimately will show you what that change is to that hierarchy, but then also will show you what that total change to all of the applications within that hierarchy are and how they impact the entire financial landscape of applications that are going to be subscribing metadata from that target hierarchy. So it allows you ultimately to keep those hierarchies in sync and in balance. But then more importantly, EPMware also puts it through a workflow and a data governance process. So that means that as a user, once you've created a new metadata item, you're able to put that metadata into workflow process where it would then push it directly to a reviewer or an approver who would log in and then either enrich that metadata with additional properties or maybe add it to an alternate hierarchy or just keep it moving as they approve it and ultimately out to deployment. Now, EPMware kind of closes that gap on the deployment side where we push metadata directly into the target application. So we've done things kind of differently where we've built target system adapters that connect directly to the Oracle on-prem and cloud applications, including ERP. And that will push that metadata either on an ad hoc basis or on a scheduled basis directly into the target application and then get feedback from that target application, whether it's actually consumed that metadata successfully or not. So ultimately, we're the source of truth for enterprise metadata management for applications that subscribe for metadata from EPMware. So a little bit about the company. My background is primarily in financial systems. So I come from the consulting world and been a HFM, FDM architect for a number of years. And so Tony and I and one of my colleagues, Devin, we started EPMware as a means to close a few gaps within the Oracle Hyperion landscape. And so the more we started implementing EPMware, our consultants, our customers started asking us to add support for other financial applications outside of Oracle Hyperion. And so we've kind of progressed into a company that kind of brings metadata management a little closer together, regardless of what the technology is that's managing it. We do have two offerings. It's on-premise and a SaaS offering. Our on-premise and SaaS, it's the exact same code base. We do work on consulting for our implementations, or we have a variety of different systems integrators also that can help with that. And then as far as training and support, we do have our own training programs, or a great partner to work with is KeyTeach at keyteach.com. They've got a really great 2-day EPMware training class that you can sign up for and learn a little bit more about. But we are headquartered in Silicon Valley, as well as New Jersey and Mumbai. Right. So, Tony, you can just click through some of these animations until we kind of get to that final view. So, the traditional request process and the issue that EPMware solves for, and I'm sure most of you are used to seeing, a flow like this, where usually the requester will start off creating that request using email or SharePoint or Excel. And what ultimately happens is when they create that request, it may be either complete or partial in all of the information that we need within that request. And so when that request kind of makes its way to an IT administrator or an EPM administrator, we go through various stages of enriching that request. And typically what we see are enrichment like, how many alternate hierarchies do we need to add this metadata to? How many total applications does this cost center need to be added to? Have we satisfied the governance requirements of this hierarchy? Like, is it does it have the right member naming convention, or have all of the properties or the elements of that metadata item been populated? And so, while we, as administrators, try to capture all of the relevant information, and then finally create structured files to be able to load this metadata to, this can be, quite time consuming to get all that detail from the users, because sometimes you have to go back and forth and, really try to understand what type of metadata am I getting? Number one, do I have the right description? Do I have the right description across multiple different applications? And have I captured that correctly? So getting that information can be quite a task, but then at the end of the day, if something fails, or we haven't aligned the right information across these financial applications, what we're going to end up with is incorrect results across financial applications once that metadata is deployed. Or even worse, metadata doesn't deploy to the target application. It simply fails when we try to go push it to that target app. And so then comes the process of rewinding or recalling metadata and trying to understand where that issue is, or why are we out in our financial reports across applications. So definitely not a position that we want to be in. So with EPMware, there are several ways to architect how we receive metadata. Now, we're envisioned as the central kind of hub and spoke for metadata management, where we have two ways to feed metadata in. Number one is your traditional end user logs into EPMware, is able to see their production hierarchy, and the end user creates a brand new request. Another method is with a source application being the source of truth for a dimension or a series of dimensions. Now, again, this just depends on, where we want to add metadata management or data governance. Sometimes, even in our own implementations, we see where certain segments of an application need to be the source of truth. So as that metadata flows in, EPMware is able to, on a source application basis, understand what the difference is when that metadata is pushed in. Once it's either received from an end user request, or whether it comes in from an ad hoc feed, EPMware is able to push it through a workflow and a governance model. So you can either do that by dimension or by application, but you can set a workflow that has a series of reviewer and approver stages. Now, reviewers are able to enrich change within EPMware, or approvers are simply allowed to approve or reject that change. But once this metadata makes it into EPMware, EPMware understands the full impact that it will have on every target application. So for instance, if as a user, I create a cost center, EPMware is going to automatically derive all the different targets that that metadata needs to flow out to. And so here from a hybrid metadata example, we have HFM, we have PCMCS, PBCS, and then Oracle Essbase on the right as subscribing applications. So EPMware is able to say, look, we're going to deploy metadata directly to the cloud applications. We're going to push it to the on-premise applications, but we'll be able to understand from one request the change that it's going to have on every single application, regardless of what that hierarchy looks like. And this is an issue that we typically see where you have HFM that's at a certain level of granularity, but then your planning applications or BI applications may not be at that same level of detail. And quite commonly so, you see a level of mapping between those applications. And that's where EPMware is able to effectively understand through a series of logic rules, when you make a change in one app, how many different applications need to receive that change, so you can get the true impact of that change before it's even pushed out to the target application. Now, when it comes to deployment, EPMware does have the ability to create an ad hoc or a scheduled deployment to that target application. So that means that as soon as you're ready to deploy request, 1, 3, and 5, for instance, you can, set a schedule for having it run every week or, every day. But EPMware then will push that metadata directly into the application and also receive successful deployment confirmation that the metadata has been consumed. So at the end of the day, you're getting a full end-to-end trail of request, whether it comes from a user or whether it comes from an application, how it was enriched and how it was reviewed or approved, and when it was deployed, and whether it was successfully deployed or not. So a ton of flexibility in this process. So some of the target adapters that we support, of course, all the Oracle on-prem cloud applications. ERP is also in the mix. But more importantly, of course, interface tables and flat files are also supported. So we see a lot of requirements where customers will say, well, I have this employee hierarchy that I need to feed in, and it's an interface table. That has to be an automated process. But we want our users to go in and create change for EBS and for all of the EPM applications in one shot. And that's a typical use case for us. So along with these out-of-the-box adapters, we also include validation logic as well. So during an EPMware implementation, you're typically spending your time not on the technical integration, but you're going to spend your time on building validations and governance that actually will help making sure that the metadata stays in sync and doesn't fail when it gets to the target application. Right. So, Tony, I will pass it over to you to talk about the hybrid environment.
Okay, thanks, Abby. Thanks for the introduction. Yep. So Abby touched on this a little bit already, but this is just kind of a graphic to kind of show you like what a typical hybrid environment may look like for a lot of companies, especially for the last several years transitioning from on-premise to the cloud. You're going to have some of your apps are still going to be on-premise, where you're going to have some apps like PBCS and FCCS and other cloud apps that are going to be in the cloud. And that interim period, even if you're going to eventually transition to the cloud, you're going to have to manage the metadata for the on-premise and the cloud apps. And like I said, Abby kind of touched on a little bit, the source can come from an automated process from an ERP system, or it could be a one-off request, or it could be something that's loaded from Excel. So the way EPMware kind of handles this is, so this is an example with EPMware Cloud. We also do have an on-premise option available, but with EPMware Cloud, we have a REST API that exists in EPMware Cloud, and then that connects with and integrates the metadata with the cloud applications. Like I said before, PBCS, FCCS, are some examples. But also we have an EPMware on-premise agent that is resides on the corporate data center on the application servers for, Hyperion apps or data warehouse, or it could be other type of app, a generic application. We can basically manage all those different types of applications. And EPMware, with using the REST API and on the on-premise agent, kind of manages and orchestrates that the communication and the movement of the metadata, to the cloud apps and to the on-premise applications. And also, connecting in to the corporate data center, you don't really need to set up a VPN connection or anything like that, because the on-premise agent, takes care of that, because it initiates communication from inside the network, and it's all outbound traffic initiated, and opens that IPsec tunnel up. So it's really easy from an IT data center perspective. There's not a lot of configuration. You install the on-premise agent, and kind of takes care of it. So I'm just going to do some high level of EPMware, then I'm going to actually get into the live application so we can take a look at it. But I just want to give you a quick overview. So the way we handle this in EPMware, this is a screenshot of the application configuration. As you can see, there's several applications we have configured in our demo environment, and a couple of them are classic applications, and we have PBCS applications. And basically from this configuration screen, you set up the credentials and put in the server information or the URL, whatever the case may be. That kind of gets the connectivity. Again, I'll get a little more detail on that when I get into the application. And then the other option is to set up, dimension mapping, where you're kind of connecting the applications, which can be on-premise or cloud applications. And this gives you the ability to, connect the dimensions. So when you add a metadata to one application, it shares it with the other application. And then another part of it is the data governance piece, which is handled by workflows in EPMware that are, really easy to configure. It's kind of, you don't need any programming to do it. And once the metadata is requested and put into a request, it goes through a workflow process, which is a review and approval process. And this is what the request looks like in EPMware. And again, this can originate from an ERP source, or it can be a one-off request, or it could be loading it from an Excel file. So there's a lot of options to actually create the request. But the data governance is handled by making everything originate from a request. So it leaves a nice audit trail of the metadata that was changed. And I'll get a little more detail on that also. Then this is what the dashboard looks like in EPMware. Kind of just shows you, what requests are in process and which ones are completed. And you can also get, you can get information like what the pending approvals are. So you can kind of see what stage of the workflow that it's at. Just get information about, including, the graphic of the workflow as well. All right, so with that, I'm going to go into a live demo of EPMware and kind of walk through some of the stuff I went through real quick, how to import the applications, set up a dimension map, what the workflow looks like, and then create a metadata request and kind of show what the dashboard is. So with that, let me get over to, this may have logged me out, but let me see. I'm still good, okay. So I'm gonna go to that, so this was the live application EPMware. This is the dashboard. I'm going to go to the application configuration to kind of show you how that's set up. So this is kind of like the first part when you want to start managing application. As I mentioned before, you'd come in and you'd set up the application, and it's really easy to do. I'll show you the properties for this one. This is our HFM classic application. You put in the application name, and that can be however you want to name it in EPMware. And the target application is the actual target application name, and you specify the application type and the version. And that's basically all you need to get kind of things rolling. And the deployment, there's some options with that. You can either do a direct deployment, which uses our API, and it actually connects to the target application, whether it's in the cloud or on premise. And once it goes through the approval process, it'll deploy the metadata directly to the target application. But we also have some other options where you could deploy it to an interface table, excuse me, if that fits into your process better, or you could actually just deploy it to a file. So there's some options there with what's generated at the end of the process. But along with that, there's also some properties that you can specify for the application. Like with PBCS, you need some information, about the data center and, the tenant name and service name. So you basically just put in those that information that you would get from Oracle for, excuse me, for the PBCS and the cloud applications. And if it's on-premise, you would put in information for the server, like the cluster name and things like that. So, but after you get that, the basic information in, and you put in the credentials, the username, password, and you could actually run, the screen's getting in the way here. You can actually click on this import button, and it'll actually start importing the metadata, right? So most of the applications, or all the Hyperion applications, we have pre-built integrations with our APIs. So you can actually just auto import. You don't have to extract files out, load it in. You can basically just do an auto import, and that'll bring in all of the properties and the hierarchies and all the members from the target application, and basically create a copy of it and get it synced up with EPMware. And that's kind of your starting point, for building a metadata application. And once you get to there, after the hierarchies are imported, this is an example of our metadata explorer, which basically, this isn't where we create a request, but you can, users that just have like read-only access can kind of come in here and look at, all the metadata hierarchies, and just kind of view the properties. So it's basically like a view-only mode of the application that you just import. And again, you don't have to go in and set up these properties. We get all that information from the XML file, and with the API, it brings all the properties in that exist in the target application. So there's really no, setups of creating all the properties. It'll bring in all the properties from the target application. But that being said, you can also create additional properties. Like if you want to have a property like, a map to property or some custom property that's going to be non-deployable, you can also do that as well for like internal reasons. If you want to just have another property to manage the metadata, you can also do that, and it just won't deploy it when you deploy the application. So after the application's in, excuse me, you have to, another option is to do dimension mapping. Okay, so what basically that does is it connects the applications. And this example I'm going to show you is it's using an HFM application and a PBCS application. So this line here for demo, it basically goes in and connects PBCS with HFM by dimension. So say in this example, you just want to connect or map the account dimension. You can select the dimension from this dropdown in the application, and then we have some options for how you want to sync it. Sync is basically just a mirror, if the applications have a mirror copy of accounts, then if you add the account to HFM, it just automatically adds exact account to the other application, PBCS. But in this example, we have like Smart Sync. And what that does is the hierarchies may not necessarily be in sync 100%. So it'll check the other application to say, does this parent exist? And if it does, then it'll add the metadata, the member. But if it doesn't, then it'll just ignore it. It'll give you just some options to do that. And then you can also see we have other options where you can create a custom logic builder script that if it's something that's a little more complex than just, if it's the parents there added or not, if it's something a little more complex where you want to check the levels, if it's different levels of hierarchies. So we can go as complicated as you want to kind of customize a logic builder script to share those two dimensions exactly like you want it set up in EPMware. Okay, so I'm going to go in and show you a request. So at this point, you have the application imported, and so all your metadata, all the properties are in EPMware. You've established a relationship between HFM and PBCS to share the account dimension. And another piece, you would have to create a workflow. I'm just going to use an existing workflow, but you can create a customized workflow with, that identifies the approval and the review processes as well. So with that, I'm going to go in and click on create a metadata request. Move the screen out of the way so I can see. So that when you come in, you can, this is the request. Again, there's options to, this is just be an example of like a one-off request, but you can put a due date for the request, but that's not mandatory. And you can pick, say like new account, and then you would pick a priority, which kind of lets you filter the workflows. In this case, I was going to pick a review and approve workflow. and go ahead and save that. So then I'm going to select the HFM application and the account dimension, and I'm going to add a new cache account to this. So if I right click on, this is basically like the exact hierarchy that you would see in HFM. So I'd right click and select new member, and let's see, 001, let's put 300 as a new cache account. And you can see in this grid up here, there's nothing in this grid, but once I add this member to the HFM application, since we map those two dimensions together, it's automatically going to go ahead and add a second line for PBCS, right? So this is a cache account that we added to HFM, but since we mapped the dimensions, it also added that to PBCS. And if you want to look at that, you can just click on it, it'll hyperlink it, and it'll select the PBCS app and the account app. So it's, you know, really easy to navigate to as well. And again, this is so you can just, and you can map, you know, several, you know, 3 or 4 applications, whatever you have together where they have similar dimensionality, you know, to kind of automate the process of adding the metadata. And, you know, again, this request can be created with like an ERP import. You can have this, you know, lights out automation where, excuse me, where it selects a delta from your ERP import, and it'll create all the new accounts that were added to your GL, for example, and it would just automatically create a request for it. Or if you have that in an Excel file, we also have a bulk upload option where you can select an Excel file, you know, and it'll just load it. And if you have like 100 members you want to add, you can select Excel file, and we have a template you can use, you know, as a starting point, and it'll just add all those 100 lines to, you know, to the request grid. And again, what, you know, this is just if you have a few, but if you have like a lot of requests, you can expand that out, and it'll just list them all out for you. So it's pretty flexible. And then after the request, you know, all the metadata is added that you want to add, you can then, excuse me, select it, submit it into the workflow. So after you submit it into the workflow, it'll kind of start going through the approval process. I'm just going to show you one that's already done. So this is like a similar request that I created. And so you can come to the dashboard, you can see that as you walk through this approval process, it'll show you the application, HFM, PBCS, and it'll show you each stage of the workflow where it had been approved or reviewed. And basically review allows the user to, you know, enrich the metadata, where approval is just, you know, they go in and look at it, and then they just, you know, say, yeah, this looks good, and they approve it. But the review stage allows the user to, again, enrich the metadata, add properties, whatever they need to do. And then you can also like hover over it, and you can see, you know, who approved it on which day, and that sort of thing as well. I'm trying to see if I have an example here of yeah, so in this case, you can also, like when it's in process, here's an example of one where you can click on pending approval, and it'll list out like who's it waiting for on approval, right? So you can come in and say, okay, well, this is in the approval stage, and these are all the people that are eligible to approve it. And then that way you can also click on it and say, okay, well, I'm going to email this person, excuse me, and tell them that, you know, this request is waiting for your approval. Go ahead and approve it. So it gives you a good ability to monitor the request and the approvals, and see who it's waiting on, and that sort of thing. Back to here, and then once excuse me. So then once it's went through the whole approval and review process, it will get deployed out to at the final stage. In this example, anyway, is the deploy stage, where that actually takes the metadata after, because everything's been reviewed and approved. And you can do this on a scheduled basis or an ad hoc basis, and it'll deploy the metadata out to the target application, whether it's HFM or PBCS. And again, so it allows you to manage the metadata for the on-premise and the cloud apps, or whatever applications, any mix of that, you know, and end-to-end process, including the data governance. And there's some other options. You can actually, you can have a stage after deploy as well, which a lot of clients do. Because you might want to deploy it to the target application, so you can go in and look at it and say, yeah, this looks good, and have a final approval after it. And it gives you the option to say, okay, well, you know, so you don't have to start all over with the request. You can just recall the request back to say, maybe this approves this review stage, let the user fix the property that's not correct or whatever, and then you can just kind of resubmit it, and it goes back to the deploy process. So those are just some other options that you have, you know, with the request. Let's see. we got a few minutes here, so I'll go into the workflow as well. Let's give you a quick look at the workflow. So basically, all the workflow is created. It's pretty simple. You create these stages in the workflow. They can be an approve stage, review stage, deploy, or there's also you can do a custom stage if you wanted to do some offline tasks, like maybe kick all go send a notification out to the Essbase users that we're going to deploy this metadata, and we have some options where we can put like custom scripting on the tasks that are associated with the workflow stage. And you can also have multiple tasks for each stage of the workflow. So it really lets you customize it, and fit it into your current process. Even if you have, a request, an outside request application that you're using, an internal ticketing system, we can also interface with that as well to kind of connect it to our request. So yeah, there's a lot of options, to kind of get it set up the way that you want to have it. All right. So with that, I was going to just open it up to any questions that anybody had. Give us a few minutes to answer any questions, and then if I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, Abby, or I believe you have the ability to take questions, so I'll just leave that open.
Yes. Attendees can put their questions in the Q&A field or the chat field. Either one works.
Okay. So will I be able to see that, or will it just be on your site?
Yes, you will. Actually, one just came in from Linda. It says, what's the difference between DRP and EPMware?
Could you, ERP, you said, and EPMware?
Yep, DRP. Oh, I'm sorry. She corrected and said DRM.
DRM, okay. Okay, go ahead. I'll let you take that one.
So there are some similarities, and then there's some differences, some major differences as well. So I would say, DRM is a master data management solution, and for EPMware, it allows master data management and data governance capabilities in one application. So where in DRM, you would only have your technical team creating metadata change there, in EPMware, you're actually enabling end users to log in and to initiate changes via the end user request that Tony showed you. In addition to that, there are also target system adapters that we have in EPMware that are not available in DRM. So the objective for EPMware is to be able to seamlessly push your metadata directly from EPMware to the target application. But for DRM, for the most part, you have to build that integration to the target. That's pretty much the major differences. There are other minor usability and performance related differences. I think we probably get into that in a different call, but so I see there's another question there. Can EPMware manage metadata to SAP? So very good question. A lot of times we do see users managing applications outside of Hyperion applications, and in SAP is a pretty popular one. So EPMware is able to manage metadata regardless of the technology that it's managing that metadata for. So we do that very easily for Oracle solutions, but we are able to manage SAP hierarchies like Profit Center, custom hierarchies as well, vendor master, customer master. So some of the examples that we've done in the past. We do have the ability to push that directly to the SAP PI module, which is similar to the ODI module for Oracle, to allow that to be picked up, or we can push that directly into SAP as well. So there's several different options to be able to enact that change. So the next question I see are, what are the max number of dimensions managed in EPMware? Is there any max limit? So good question. There is not a limit on dimensions that you can manage in EPMware. EPMware has two methods of architecture. One is the traditional, I would say like it's like the DRM style of metadata management, where everything is combined for all applications into one hierarchy. EPMware works a little bit differently. It can do that, but it's best to use when giving end users the ability to look at your application metadata, giving them a starting point like a local application view. So that allows you to manage your dimensions at an application level. Now, there isn't any limit to manage that metadata in EPMware. If your dimension for your app has, if there's like, 13 dimensions, that's okay. If it has 50 dimensions, that's still okay. You have the ability to create custom applications in EPMware as well that are not associated with any technology. So, we've had use cases where you can manage, hundreds of thousands of nodes or even millions of nodes as well.
All right.
All right. So I'm looking over to see if there's any other questions here.
Any more questions from anyone?
Nope.
Oh.
And we got half of a question. Yeah, so while that question comes in, just wanted to elaborate on, a lot of our customers are using us to evaluate the shift from EPMA as they upgrade to 11.2. So as we know, 11.2 EPMA is going away, and our options over there are, again, DRM Lite, which can be used if you don't have a larger number of applications or if you don't have any data governance. But if that's something that you're thinking about and you have to manage metadata without EPMA, we've been a popular choice for that, and would love to talk to you. So the other question is, how do you manage security in EPMware? So again, good question. EPMware kind of mimics a Hyperion security, where it uses a series of security groups, security classes on various elements of EPMware metadata. So you can apply security to the application level, you can apply it to the dimension level, and also down to the individual node level as well. You can also put EPMware security on workflows and workflow objects like stages and tasks. So what that does is that gives you the ability to say, I want one of my end user groups to create a change in the P&L and the balance sheet hierarchy only. I don't want them to make any changes to the stat accounts in my hierarchy. And so if I fall under that security group, I won't be able to make any changes. In addition to that, I can say, I want my workflow for this security group to be applied to this set of individuals. So as an end user, if I log in and I only have access to, the general dimension workflow, that's the only one that I'll be able to see. I won't be able to put a request into the admin workflow. And again, the modules that we showed on the left, on the sidebar, those are all covered with security as well. So typically our end users have access only to the metadata browser or the ability to create requests. But more importantly, you can tailor this security to give your end user the security that you want, because everyone's end user is really, a different definition. Sometimes it's a power user, sometimes it's an end user, and some of our customers just use it from an admin perspective. So depending on what your use case is and where you're starting with using EPMware to govern your enterprise metadata, that's where we'll tailor the security to best manage those dimensions.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. We also have the ability to connect to your any single sign-on you have set up at your corporate level, whether it's Microsoft Active Directory or a SAML single sign-on. We can connect EPMware to that and add those SSO users to our security groups to manage the security also.
Cool. So I see one more question. So what specific gaps does your product fill compared to DRM? So again, so we started with the ability to manage data governance, and that's one, because I think in DRG DRG is a separate purchase. DRM has, from what we've heard, doesn't have an innate ability to manage alternate and primary hierarchies very well. I think there's a naming restriction over there. So with EPMware out of the box, you have the ability to create member names with the same member as primary and alternate in alternate hierarchies, because EPMware kind of tags them the way an Hyperion application would, with shared at the end. So you're able to see your primary hierarchy and then your alternate hierarchy with shared at the end. You really don't have to add a separate member name and then kind of strip that member name off on the tail end of the export. Also, EPMware manages metadata on an application basis. So we're able to kind of, take a HFM application, have it as the leading application where everyone's going to interact on, and then that will map changes out to planning, PBCS, and so on. But then at the end of the day, EPMware is directly deploying that local application view to the target app. So you don't have to build those integrations on the side. So those are some of the big ones. Obviously, from a licensing perspective, we don't charge by node. We have our own kind of like unlimited node licensing model. So, some folks may see that as a gap and some may not. But, those are probably what we've seen as some of the big differences. I think we have time for one last question. Can we have a connection to Hyperion planning and S-based targets? How about cloud connections? So yes, we do support all Hyperion on-prem and cloud applications out of the box. So that means HFM S-based planning, also PBCS, FCCS, TRCS, PCMCS, ARCS, and so on. So all of those are fully supported out of the box. You're up and running and deploying to them on day one when you're using EPMware. So we have a lot of customers who use us to actually make the migration from on-prem to the cloud. For example, even using using S-Base to go to 19C. You don't have to upgrade to the latest version in order to get to 19C. You can just use EPMware to deploy directly out with your current hierarchy. So there's plenty of different use cases. I know we're running up on time right now, so if you're interested, please feel free to come by to epmware.com and reach out to us, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. So again, thank you guys for joining. Thank you to Interrel and Edward for hosting this conference, and thank you, Tony.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Enjoy
thank you everybody. Thank you, Abby and Tony. We really appreciate you guys coming on today. So thanks so much.